The gunmetal doors of Ashcroft Tower slid open, and the room went silent the moment Marcus Whitfield walked in wearing a jacket that had seen better decades, work boots caked with dried concrete, and eyes that hadn't slept properly in months. Every board member turned to stare. Every assistant froze mid-step. Because standing there, in the gleaming lobby of the most powerful tech company in the state, was a man who looked like he'd wandered in from a construction site to beg for spare change, not a man who had just been offered $1 million to fight for his daughter's life. Before we go further, if you believe people deserve second chances, if you believe kindness can change destinies, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because stories like this one deserve to be told, and deserve to be heard by people who still believe in miracles. 3 months earlier, Marcus Whitfield had been a nobody. A 34-year-old single father working 2 jobs, loading crates at a warehouse by day, driving for a rideshare app by night, just to keep a roof over his daughter's head. His daughter, 7-year-old Nora, had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition that required a surgery costing more money than Marcus could earn in 5 years of backbreaking labor. The hospital bills piled up like snow in a blizzard, burying him a little more every single day. He had already sold his truck, pawned his late wife's wedding ring, and maxed out every credit card he owned. There was nothing left to sell. Nothing left to give, except, perhaps, himself. That morning, Marcus had gone to Ashcroft Tower not for a job interview, but because of a flyer he'd seen taped to a gas station bulletin board. It read, Ashcroft Enterprises Charity Combat Trial, winner receives $1 million for medical fund. Open challenge against company security chief. At first, Marcus thought it was a joke, some kind of publicity stunt for a company that had more money than sense. But when he called the number, a receptionist confirmed it was real. CEO Julian Ashcroft, a billionaire known for his eccentric philanthropic gestures and his love of spectacle, had decided to turn charity into entertainment. Beat his security chief, a former Olympic-level combat athlete named Dmitry Volkov, in a sanctioned exhibition match, and walk away with enough money to save a child's life. When Marcus arrived at the tower that morning, he wasn't the only one who'd shown up. Dozens of hopeful fighters, desperate men and women with their own broken stories, filled the waiting room. Some were former soldiers, some were amateur boxers chasing a dream. But when Julian Ashcroft walked into that lobby, dressed in a $3,000 suit, sipping coffee like the world owed him nothing but admiration, his eyes swept across the crowd and landed on Marcus last. He laughed, not cruelly, but with the careless amusement of a man who had never once worried about money in his life. You, he said, pointing directly at Marcus. The one in the work jacket. You really think you can beat Dmitry? The room chuckled along with him. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply looked the billionaire dead in the eye and said, I don't think, sir. I know I have to. Something about those 5 words silenced the laughter. Julian tilted his head, studying this stranger with sudden curiosity. Fine, he said finally. $1 million if you beat my security chief. Then, almost mockingly, he added, good luck. That was when Marcus Whitfield slowly unzipped his worn jacket and let it fall from his shoulders, revealing forearms roped with muscle earned from years of manual labor, and a quiet, burning determination that no designer suit could ever replicate. What nobody in that room knew, except Marcus himself, was that before the warehouse job, before the late nights driving strangers across the city, before fatherhood had softened his edges, Marcus had spent 6 years as a Marine Corps combatives instructor. He hadn't touched a real fight in nearly a decade, not since his wife passed away from a car accident that left him raising Nora alone, but muscle memory doesn't disappear. It sleeps. And that morning, in the heart of Ashcroft Tower, it woke up. The battle itself unfolded on the top floor of the building, in a private gymnasium normally reserved for corporate wellness retreats, but transformed for the occasion into something resembling a modern gladiator arena, complete with cameras live streaming the event for shareholders and media alike. Dmitry Volkov stepped onto the mat like a machine built for destruction, 6'4", over 250 pounds of sculpted power, his expression as unreadable as stone. Marcus, by comparison, looked painfully human. Tired, undersized, outmatched by every visible metric. Julian Ashcroft settled into his front row seat with the smug satisfaction of a man who already knew how this would end, ready to be entertained for exactly as long as it took his security chief to finish the job. The first exchange proved everyone right. Dmitry's opening strike sent Marcus stumbling backward, a burst of pain exploding across his jaw. The crowd gasped. Someone in the back muttered that the fight should be stopped before the poor man got seriously hurt. But Marcus didn't fall. He planted his feet, wiped the blood from his lip, and did something that made Julian Ashcroft sit up straight in his chair. He smiled. Not out of arrogance, but out of memory, the kind of memory that lives in the body long after the mind has moved on. He remembered his instructors barking orders in the humid heat of training camps. He remembered discipline. He remembered why he had learned to fight in the first place, not to hurt people, but to protect the ones he loved. For the next several minutes, the two men traded blows in a dance that grew increasingly desperate, increasingly human. Dmitri had size and technical brilliance, honed by years of professional competition. But Marcus had something the security chief had never needed to develop, a reason that outweighed pain itself. Every time Dmitri landed a strike, Marcus thought of Nora's small hand gripping his in the hospital waiting room, asking him if she was going to be okay. Every time his body screamed at him to stay down, he thought of the promise he'd whispered to her the night before, "Daddy's going to fix this. I promise." And promises, Marcus had learned, were the heaviest and most powerful things a man could carry into battle. The fight stretched past the 2-minute mark, then 3, then 4, far longer than anyone in that room had expected. Sweat and blood mixed on the mat beneath them. Julian Ashcroft's smug expression had long since faded, replaced by something closer to disbelief, and then, slowly, something closer to respect. Around the 7th minute, Dmitri, frustrated by his opponent's refusal to break, threw a wild, overextended strike, a mistake born of exhaustion and ego. Marcus saw the opening the way a starving man sees bread. He ducked low, drove forward with every remaining ounce of strength in his battered body, and executed a clean, textbook takedown that brought the towering security chief crashing to the mat. Seconds later, it was over. Dmitri tapped out, breathless, staring up at the ceiling in stunned silence. The gymnasium erupted, not with laughter this time, but with disbelieving, thunderous applause. Julian Ashcroft rose slowly from his seat, walked onto the mat himself, and extended a hand to help Marcus up. For the first time all morning, there was no mockery in his eyes, only something rawer, something almost humbled. "Why?" Julian asked quietly, "did you fight so hard for money you could have just asked me for?" Marcus, still catching his breath, wiped the sweat from his brow and answered honestly. "Because charity feels like pity, sir. This felt like earning it. My daughter deserves a father who fought for her, not one who just asked for help." Julian Ashcroft said nothing for a long moment. Then he did something none of his employees had ever seen him do. He embraced a stranger in front of everyone, right there on the mat, blood and sweat be damned. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Every single interaction helps this channel keep telling stories that matter. True to his word, Julian Ashcroft didn't just hand over the $1 million, he personally arranged for Nora's surgery to be performed by the finest pediatric cardiac team in the country, covering every expense beyond the prize money itself. He visited the hospital during Nora's recovery, not as a billionaire making a donation, but as a man who had witnessed something that morning he hadn't experienced in years: genuine, desperate, unshakable love. Marcus Whitfield later accepted a position within Ashcroft Enterprises' new community outreach division, helping design programs for struggling families facing medical crises just like his own had been. He never forgot where he came from, and he never let his daughter forget either. Before we close this story, I want to ask something special from you. If you're reading this far, if this story stirred something in your chest, type the words, "I believe in second chances," in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know how many of you still believe that ordinary people can rise to do extraordinary things when the people they love need them most. Nora Whitfield turned 8 years old 6 months after her surgery, celebrating her birthday not in a hospital bed, but in a sunlit backyard, laughing, running, and blowing out candles surrounded by family who once feared they might never see this day arrive. Marcus stood off to the side, watching her chase bubbles across the grass, his heart fuller than it had ever been. He hadn't just beaten a security chief that morning in Ashcroft Tower. He had beaten fear, poverty, and the quiet despair that whispers to every desperate parent that they aren't enough. He had proven, in the most dramatic way imaginable, that love isn't measured in money or status, but in the willingness to take off your jacket, step onto the mat, and fight for the ones who cannot fight for themselves.